We'll be on in another 30 seconds, I think.
Oh, there's Christina.
Yeah. Come sit next to me. Next. Touch, touch, touch. Closer. There we go.
Okay.
I can sit lower, maybe. We're on. Hello, 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 hello. Are we lucky tonight? Are you lucky tonight? We have Susan Allen, who's going to help herself and me learn about voice. So we're going to learn how our vocal cords work, and we're going to do warm-up exercises. My name is Michael Koran, from The Healing Voice by Paul Newham. You can see him on YouTube. How to use the power of your voice to bring harmony. Well, wouldn't that be nice? Harmony, Susan. How to use the power of your voice to bring harmony into your life, maybe into our life too.
Hopefully.
Okay, so you can tell us maybe, if you like, how you got interested in him, Paul Newham.
Someone had given me this book, and honestly, if they're listening to this, I wish they'd tell me, because there's no name in it, but someone, I'm a voice person, and someone had given me this book. And I hadn't looked at it. It had hung around for about 2 months. And I finally picked it up, and I thought, what have I been missing all my life? For me, singing is essential, but more than singing, I would say, and I've spoken this to Michael.
Why is singing essential for you?
Well, it's become kind of a habit.
Well, some habits need breaking, yes.
Singing is vibrating your whole being, and at least you try to, on a daily basis, if you take it seriously. And when I was young, I did take it seriously. I have to tell you, when I first began, it seemed like a momentous trial that I was going through.
And when did you begin, and where?
I began because I got a very bad grade in, I began at 4 years old. Really, Michael.
Yes.
I began at 4. I loved the sound of my own voice. And my mother would try to keep me quiet because I loved the sound of my own voice so much. It helped me get into, I came from a very middle-class family, but they didn't know how to connect with each other. They didn't know how to communicate with each other. And so I started communicating with myself. And I came to that conclusion after years and years of understanding, you know, when somebody asked me, when did you start? I thought, why did I do that? Well, children do that. Babies do that. Babies come in and talk their own language. They talk to themselves. And I could say that they actually are still in communication with God. Whoever God may be for you or to you, or however you think of God, a source higher than yourself, outside of yourself, or maybe a source within yourself. And so for me, I found when I was 4 years old that it comforted me to make sounds. It comforted me to talk with myself. I used to walk in the woods to school in Connecticut. I had to walk through the woods, and I found myself singing. I found myself talking to the trees. I found myself creating stories.
You talked to the trees and thought they listened?
Yes? Yeah. I didn't start hugging trees until...
Did they talk back?
They did.
They talked back?
Yes,
do you remember
they did.
anything that
Yes, they
that a
did.
particular tree said?
Inner feeling, comforting, comfort, solid.
They said those words, or that's what you felt?
No, that's what I felt.
Did they say words? Or?
No.
Oh.
No, they didn't say words when I was
No,
younger.
but they
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
communed inner solidity.
In their own language.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tree language,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Or maybe there's an oak
Exactly.
language and
Yeah. Yeah.
a maple language.
Well, let's see, there were firs. There
Mm.
were lots of pine trees
Oh.
and there were lots of hemlock trees
Mm.
in that forest. So when it was snowing, I used to have my own little hut. So the tree would droop down with the weight of the snow, and I would crawl in, and I'd be with the pine needles,
Mm.
and I'd be covered, and I'd be safe in that. So I always said if I had a choice of where I wanted to die, it would probably be in the winter, going into one of the hemlock trees that are weighted
Mm.
down with snow, and be able to smell the pine needles
Mm.
and the hemlock. That was a lovely feeling. And I was a kid that contemplated death, actually. I was a child that contemplated, not in a morbid sense, but in a curious sense. So, so the sound of the brook, I used to put my ear to the knoll where the moss was, and I used to put my ear and listen to the brook babble, the sound of the brook. So those were all comforting things for me as a child with a family that wasn't particularly violent. They were loud, but they weren't particularly physically violent. I think maybe a couple of times things got out of hand, but just the loud noise frightened me. And that brought me to an out-of-the-body experience. When I was a child, quite often I would go to sleep and I would leave my body, and I could remember floating. I could remember the front of my body. I could never feel the back of my body, but I could remember floating down the hallways and having it be extremely comforting, and not wanting to get back in my body, because coming back into my body would mean that I'd have to put up with the trauma, the noise. So we didn't plan on that tonight. We didn't plan on talking about that, but it ties into what Michael and I have often have asked ourselves before the show about trauma, and about when the voice becomes silent within you, and what makes that happen.
Well, when I was young, there was a lot of hitting. Even older than you, way. So my mother had a piercing voice. I remember when I grew up, I said, "Mom, why don't we talk to each other in a kind way?" And she says, "Stop trying to control how I talk. You're Hitler." And I grew up during World War II, when my father left us to sweep mines in the Pacific Ocean. And according to my mom wrote, "I'm not coming back." He preferred that to living in our family. So it was a piercing, unpleasant voice, my mother's tongue. And I remember once, I'm 11 years old, I always remember this, and we're visiting my Aunt Joyce, and they have a kinder family. Mm. My Uncle Barney was a colonel in the Air Force, Colonel Koran. And they, at least on the surface, were very kind to each other, military, and the military wife, Aunt Joyce. And I remember walking in their neighborhood in Queens, and all of a sudden, everything sounds very, very loud. Things had never sounded so loud before. Cars, doors opening and shut, maybe even the wind. And I walk up the stairs to my Aunt Joyce and Uncle Barney's home, And just before I open the door, I think everybody's going to put a mask on as soon as I walk in and pretend to be who they're not. In ways I didn't think then, but I could now ask, what's the relationship between the loud voices, the loud sounds I'm hearing, and this really revelation? Because in some ways, certainly Aunt Joyce and Uncle Barney did have masks on, and I thought everyone would pretend to be my aunt, my uncle, my father and mother. And then I didn't think about it. It's just that one truthful moment. But maybe the loud, I'm guessing on this now, maybe the loud sounds I'm hearing there are lots of sounds going on that I'm not hearing underneath the sounds that people are pretending to be who they are. Mm-hmm. Certainly in me there was all kinds of screams and cries.
That leads me to why a child would come to the conclusion that everybody's putting a mask on. So we know that children come out honest. They come out innocent. They come out as dolphins swim, as elephants move toward their children. Just naturally, they come out and they open up to an environment which they cannot help. And so within that environment, they must adjust to survive. And so that's directly related to the voice. Because a child naturally, gleefully wants to come and express itself in any way that it can. It needs love. It needs affection. It needs connection. It needs support. The child needs support.
And when we don't get that, I'm force-fed when I'm a child because they try to feed me on the schedule, and I refuse. And the voice and the throat are very connected. I refuse to take the food in at the end of the 4th hour, and scream for food between then. But it was my parents' first joint activity, which they liked to do actually, in torturing this child that was forcing them to stay together when they didn't, and when they hated each other. So I would scream, that would be honest, refuse to eat even though I was so hungry. Good for me. And they would force it down, food. So that was one of my throat's early experiences, which I'm very grateful to my father for telling me this about 5 years before he died, because I didn't know this.
And you'd carried it somehow in your DNA, in your cells.
Well, I would find, you might be sympathetic to this, that when I went away to school, sometimes if I ate even a section of an orange, it wouldn't digest, and it would take me like 2 days and I would lose all my energy trying to digest this one little section of orange.
Oh.
And then I eventually learned that smoking, Alka-Seltzer, and Pepsi helped digest that section of orange.
That's a survival remedy.
So that was eating, and I wonder what the relationship, you would probably know a lot about this too, the relationship between eating, which is taking in, and voice, which is giving out.
Well, they're two different, the esophagus closes over so that you have, the esophagus is a long pipe right next to the windpipe. And magically, when you go to eat, now I say that magically, but the mind knows, the esophagus knows when to close over the windpipe, because otherwise you would get food down into your lungs.
Yes.
Because the windpipe goes down and it splits off into the lungs. And actually, Michael, if you will turn The truth is that the lungs are more in the back area here than they are in the front. And so if I were to ask Michael to, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. If I were to ask Michael to fill up all of his lungs and to push my arms with his breath, to push my arms out, I'm pressing underneath his armpits. And I'm going to ask him to push my hands out easy. And people don't know this, but it takes a little bit of concentration. Usually people want to fill up from the front, and they tighten their solar plexus. But when you fill the lungs and imagine the lungs, visualization is great. When you fill the lungs and imagine the lungs to be back here, your actual solar plexus will relax. If you lean over just a tad bit forward, a little more, that's it. Now, feel the lungs, push my hands out, and let go. And you might feel the tension release, if there was any, from your solar plexus area, which is down by your sternum. So, I can see, I don't know if you in the audience can see this, but I can see him filling the back of his lungs. Your sweater's nice for that. Okay. Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful. Well done.
Wow, it's wonderful to just breathe and know that you're doing great, which is probably true, right? We're still breathing. So I hope we haven't lost our thread of the healing voice. We've been talking about the challenges to both of our voices.
But that brings us to our book.
Oh, it does. Good.
And Paul Benham is in the United Kingdom.
Paul Newham.
I'm sorry, Paul Newham. Thank you.
N-E-W Newham. And he runs a farm.
And he now runs a farm. He bought it in 1986. He wrote the book in 1999. He worked with people with challenges for a very long time, and he worked with them to have them emote in a sounding way. Children that were autistic, children that had emotional challenges, all that kind of thing, and also adults. So he spent a lot of time doing that. One of the workers came by and said, "Would you teach me how to do that?" And he said that when he started with her, she loved it and he never turned back. And since then, he has taught and coached this voice movement therapy, is what it's called, voice movement therapy. And he's taught sounding and toning to the Royal Shakespeare and the Conservatory of Music and the opera in the United Kingdom and many groups around there. So he's very fascinated with having people find their unique sound, their unique way of balancing and expressing themselves. And so I thought this was very interesting. And Paul has something that I wanted to read an excerpt, but I think I'd like, would you read it?
Okay.
I was born
and raised in the middle of an overcrowded housing estate just north of London. My mother was of a mild and gentle nature, not my mom, who bonded with me in intimacy and confidence. Well, My father was an angry, wrathful man who taught me how to rise early and work. The relationship between my parents was terrible and terrifying. I can identify. My father was a heavy drinker, not my dad, had hands like dinner plates, and a voice which was loud as a horn and rough as sandpaper. My mother, meanwhile, lived on instant coffee and cigarettes and raised her voice only in desperation.
Yeah. So you can see he goes on to speak about his father regularly returning to the house, and his mother in the middle of the night, and his mother would descend the stairs, and he would begin hollering and shouting. And one of the things that he mentions is that these thunderous baritonal yells of rage blended with high whimpering sobs of my mother, producing an orchestral duet with a dark and bleak ambience. My sister and I were always keen to understand the story behind the sounds. The story behind the sounds. And we'll explore some of that. We'll also do some exercises. They tried to take a toothbrush cup and put it on the floor and put their ear to it to see if they could hear the words. But alas, we could never hear the words that were being uttered, only the ferocious and intense passion with which the voices resounded. It was not until I was an adult that I learned the suffering that both my father and mother endured as children, and was able to understand the roots of his rage and her timidity. So we all have it. We all know this story very, very well, and we may have put it aside, we may have buried it inside, but it will always come out. And one of the ways that it comes out is that we have difficulty in our vocal expression. And we'd say to ourselves, gee, I wonder what it would be like to have full vocal expression, to have myself be able to express myself in my fullness of who I am, uniquely mine, my own. And so tonight is one of the things that we're going to do is begin that journey. If you'd like to come with us, we'd like you to join us.
We're actually going to be watching you, thanks to the NSA, which is now partnering with CCTV, and you really will be known by everybody in the NSA who likes to check out these things if you're not participating while watching, and you have no idea what possibilities this information can be used for. We're going to be continuing in another 3.5 minutes on Michael Mack's, actually another 6 minutes we'll end, on Michael Mack's God Talk Guy show, which I'm off and on. And we will connect this in some creative way with God, because Michael would like us to do that, being a very
nice,
godly being himself.
Great.
But we don't have to bring God in yet. We still have...
Well, we brought him in already,
yes,
didn't we?
We still have 4 minutes of this show, 3-minute intermission, and then the God Talk Guy will begin.
Okay. So one of the, and I think you saw the picture of the book here, and it's called The Healing Voice, How to Use the Power of Your Voice to Bring Harmony into Your Life. Again, I think Michael had mentioned that, but I want to make sure that you understand that this is probably one of the most wonderful, powerful books that I, in my vocal study and my vocal singing, have ever read. It resounds right to the core.
I thought it could teach me how to sing and dance, move, and how to really do that honestly. I'm used to faking honesty very, very convincingly, at least to me and probably no one else, by speaking in Quaker meeting. I'm a member of the Quaker meeting in 5 Longfellow Place in Harvard Square, and they teach us to speak when the Spirit speaks through us, which was extremely helpful to me. It was like another voice inside me that I didn't know was there, and I learned in my own very masculine way to speak the words I heard inside that I hadn't spoke before. But I didn't, so I spoke spirit words that were true to me, but didn't know until, in some ways, begin reading this book, oh my, and when my beloved sweetheart moved out, oh my, I can't just speak from the spirit and from my head. I need to speak from my body. You know, like a baby speaks from his body, like I did when I was screaming as a child, or refusing food. So I'm now beginning at this advanced age, lucky you're younger, to begin to learn with the help of Susan in this book, how to speak honestly, I don't really know, with my body and feelings. Not just to say I'm angry, but in some ways to allow, in ways I don't know, in safe ways, to allow the anger and the hurt to turn into sound word movements.
One of those things, Michael, that is so beautiful that you
and
were so
I'm going to
honest.
save you. Well, this is Coming Attraction. See you in 3 minutes.
Success. So.
Yes, very nice.
Okay, so are you ready? Look what this says. It segues. The end result of voice movement therapy is that the client finds access to sounds which give expression to aspects of the self, the psyche, or the soul, which have been hidden in dark, unseen, and unheard.
Yes, that's exactly what.
The effect of the work is psychologically uplifting,
Yes.
physically invigorating, creatively rejuvenating, and serves to release the voice and the spirit from constriction and isolation.
Yes, so we can.
And so that's what you were just saying.
Yes, we can begin with that and connect that to God quickly. God is helping us. If we are living, dancing, singing our true self, we're in touch with reality, which is divinity.
It is, and your and presence, I might add, takes place with the connection of the body, the mind, and the spirit. But when the connection is lost,
Yes.
then we have to do the best that we can.
To get it back, maybe.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we don't even recognize. Thoreau said that most men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Fortunately, women, that doesn't include women. That's very lucky.
No, I'm sorry. I felt the disconnection. So, yeah, that's really wonderful. So, are we taking a break?
Yes, I think we're being recorded on the DVD, which we might put on YouTube. But our Cambridge community, or our online community, which might include Chris Orth from Wayland, is not seeing us now.
Oh, okay.
Until in another 45 seconds, we will start Michael Mack's show.
Oh, listen to this. In the beginning, there was no word, for the words were all with God.
I found that, I didn't like that. It kept saying that.
In the beginning, there were only sounds.
That kept irritating me.
It did. Oh, it had smacked of some kind of
No, I don't know. I mean, why were the words only with God? I mean, what does that mean? The trees have words, and brooks, as you know, have words, and snow